So have you ever thought you were being helpful only later to realize that you were actually crossing somebody's boundaries? That's what we're going to talk about today, is 7 subtle signs that you may be crossing somebody's boundaries without realizing it, and how to fix it. Because relationships need boundaries to be healthy. But if you're new, my name is Michelle Ferris. I'm a psychotherapist and I love helping people create relationships that work. And you can listen to this not only on my YouTube channel, but on my podcast YouTube channel as well. So crossing somebody's boundaries happens more than you think, especially if you have a big heart and you struggle with issues of codependency like I have. Your desire to be helpful in your relationships leads the way. The problem is that if that other person isn't asking for help, it can lead to us crossing somebody's boundaries without even realizing it, even though your intentions are good. So the first example of when you may be crossing somebody's boundaries is ignoring somebody's request without realizing it. Maybe someone is asking for space and you know they're hurting and you think, oh sure, I'll respect that. And then later in the day you think, oh my gosh, they probably really need support. I'm gonna text them. And it falls flat or it causes a rift in the friendship. Because when you do that, you're crossing somebody's boundaries without realizing it. Because let's face it, your intentions are good, you want to help, but if they've asked for space, it's our job to keep that. I know for me, years ago, I did this when my cousin went into labor. I was super excited and I wanted to be part of the process. But her mom told me, don't contact her. She's in early labor, contact me instead. Well, I got so excited that I texted her anyway. And it caused a huge rift in my relationship with my other family member. And looking back, I realized even though I meant well, it was selfish of me to cross that boundary that was so clearly set because I wanted to be a part of the process. But that's also part of codependency recovery, realizing where you may be inserting yourselves in situations where you really don't need to because the other person doesn't want it. Because here's the thing, ignoring somebody's boundary is really sending them the message that your needs override their request or their boundary. And that's not going to help your relationship. So what you want to do instead is pause and honor that person's boundary. Because that is the way you're going to avoid overstepping and crossing their boundaries. But sometimes we need help to do that. So what I wish I would have done is call a friend and talk it out. Because that would have stopped me. That would have made me realize, oh yeah, you know what? I am wanting to override my aunt's request, and that's never a good thing. So talking things out, doing some journaling can be ways to pause and really honor that other person's boundary. The next example of crossing somebody's boundary without realizing it is texting them repeatedly instead of waiting for a response. This one's tricky because texting is really become a huge form of communication now. And a lot of times what I notice is people get really anxious when somebody doesn't respond to a text right away, especially if you're in an intimate relationship with them or you have lots of expectations of them responding back. I used to do this one too, where I would wait maybe an hour or two and I couldn't wait any longer. So I would text them again because I wanted that connection so much. But if you find yourself doing that, that's a major sign probably that there might be some codependency going on where you're a little too attached to that relationship or that person responding right away. And let's face it, in today's world, people don't have any obligation to respond to a text right away. Sometimes they don't see it, sometimes they get busy, and our expectation of that gets us into trouble. So what do you do instead? Maybe you walk away from your phone. Call a friend, you take a walk, you tell yourself, you know what, just because somebody isn't responding doesn't mean they don't care about you. Because that's what I find people doing is when somebody doesn't respond right away, maybe you find yourself going into some negative self-talk and telling yourself, oh my gosh, they're not responding. Does that mean they don't care about me? And most of the time it doesn't mean that at all. But catching that negative self-talk is part of what you want to do to honor that person's boundary. Because if they haven't texted you back yet, there's probably a very good reason. And if they don't like as much contact as you do, that's also a healthy boundary. Not everybody wants a lot of instant connection, and that's okay too. Another example of when you may be crossing a boundary without realizing it is thinking you know best. So maybe your friend is hurting and you want to respect their boundary because they've asked for some space. But again, your intentions are good, so maybe you give them a day or two, but they haven't reached out yet. So you think, you know what, I'm gonna go bring them a meal. I'm gonna go bring them flowers. I'm gonna text them and check in. When really they don't want that. They've already set that boundary. But if you have a big heart, sometimes we think that we have other people's solutions. So we think, oh, you know what, this is really gonna help the situation, when in fact it doesn't. It actually hurts the situation because you're overstepping into someone else's boundary, and that's not good. If you've ever done this before, say me too in the comments. I'm right there with you, but this video is gonna help. So another example that you may be crossing someone's boundary is giving physical touch or affection without asking. Because a lot of people these days don't want physical touch. We can't assume that they want affection because we do, or they need comforting with a hug because we like a hug. That isn't the case these days. A lot of people have gone through a lot of trauma and they don't like to be touched. So it's really important when it comes to physical touch and affection to, at least in the beginning of the relationship, ask, say, hey, is it okay if I give you a hug? Because then you'll negotiate the boundary and it's going to be a lot easier. Because the people who don't want hugs are usually pretty clear about that. And that's a very important boundary for you to be respecting, because that's going to go a long way for the other person to feel safe with you. Another common example when you may be crossing somebody's boundary is giving unsolicited advice. Again, if you have a big heart and you struggle with codependency, you may be the first one in line to help when they have a problem or they need advice. But if they're not directly asking for that advice, I don't want you to be giving it. Because this one I have done many times where I offer advice, but they never asked for it. So I'm really clear nowadays, I don't do that. In fact, instead, what I have you do is to say, you know what, how can I help you? I'm here for you. I can listen. Because that is how you're going to support somebody. Not everybody wants advice. So when we give it without being asked, we really are crossing a boundary. So another example of when we may be crossing a boundary without realizing it is oversharing in a social situation. Maybe we meet somebody and we feel super connected, so we start telling them our life story or really intimate details of our relationship when they don't know us yet. And usually this is really off-putting, because a healthy person is going to say, whoa, I don't need all those details, because it's overwhelming and it's not appropriate when we haven't built a relationship with someone yet. So oversharing is another one of those boundaries we may not realize that we're crossing. So what to do instead? Be mindful when you meet someone and don't go into your story. Ask them questions. Tell them a little bit about your story, but don't go into a lot of nitty-gritty details, because that's how you build healthy relationships, by slowly getting to know each other, not dumping our emotional garbage in their lap, because that's going to make them not want to be in relationship with us, and I don't want that for you. So another common example of when you may be crossing somebody's boundary is trying to fix somebody's feelings. Maybe somebody is really upset and you say something like, oh, it'll get better. It's not that bad. This'll pass. Sometimes that can be helpful, but often that can be very invalidating for the other person. Like when I was going through a lot of grief a couple of years ago, I didn't want people to say it was going to get better, because when you're in grief, you're in it and you just want validation that it's okay to be hurting. But in today's culture, we tend to want to put a Band-Aid on things really quickly by saying, oh, it'll be okay, you're strong, you can get through this. But when someone's in a lot of pain, validating that pain and listening to it is going to go far better than you giving them those platitudes that can often cause them to pull away from you. And I don't want that. So if you can relate to crossing any one of these boundaries, I'm right there with you. This is why I'm talking about it, because part of what we need to do is be more mindful of what the other person needs and not override that with what we need. And that's why doing relationship recovery and self-help work is really going to go a long way, not only for your relationships to get better, but you to feel better as well. So the next step I want you to do is I want you to go watch my video on how to set boundaries, because that is your next step. Thanks so much.